Well, good evening and welcome to this episode of the Pointbreak Roundtable. My name's Tyler Riley, and my guests this evening are seniors, which just hurts to say every single time, but Christina Hartmann, who is a senior at Klein Oak, and then Wyatt Ferguson, who's a senior at Cain. Our topic tonight is leading your peers. You are both in positions of leadership within Pointbreak and even maybe some leadership positions outside of that. Christina, you lead our welcome team. Wyatt, you're part of Pointbreak worship, so leading students in worship from the stage. And so the first question that I kind of want to open it all up with is what's a key thing, like a key lesson that you've learned in leadership?
I would say I kind of have learned that it's more important to know the people that you're serving. And I say serving because that's something that I've kind of had to learn. It's not who you're really leading in a sense. You get to serve them by what you do. So I would say it's more about like who you're serving and who you're serving with, and less of the like logistics of every little thing that you have to do. Because at least for me, I can get kind of caught up in that sometimes. So it's been hard, and some hard times where I'm like, okay, I need to recognize this person's a person on my team and they're here to help me serve and not just a person that fulfills a task. So knowing the people you serve and then knowing like your audience as well.
Yeah, for sure. And to kind of further that, knowing what they need from you. You know, I'm in band leadership in my school, and a lot of times I'll get carried away with I'll lead a rehearsal or something, and I'm like doing what we have scheduled, or I'm doing what I think would be the best thing to do. But then I'm not like paying attention to what the people around me are struggling with, or what the people around me are just having problems with. And one of the things is being attentive to your peers and who you're leading is knowing what they need from you and knowing how you can serve them directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is, I mean, y'all are both hitting on just a really good leadership lesson. And oftentimes it's kind of summed up as more people-focused than task-focused. It's like the reality is you have stuff that you need to get done, right? You have a goal that you need to accomplish. Right. But at the same time, people can get so caught up in just the task or, as you said, Christina, like them just fulfilling the task, that you're not realizing that the most impactful leaders are people who like really care about the people that they're leading and really know them well. And it helps you lead better. If I just walk up to somebody I don't know, like I don't know them all well at all, and I just start trying to boss them around, it's not going to go over very well. You want, you want to lead people in a way where they would want to follow you, where that's kind of like that desire that they have to follow you. One example of that I kind of think of, and I've used this a couple of times, but I was listening to a podcast recently, and there was a football player. His name's Sam Acho. He played at the University of Texas and then played for the Chicago Bears. And he was hosting this like dinner. He had this dinner every year, and it was the whole premise of it was that celebrities, he would get famous celebrities in the area of Chicago who would come, and they would actually like wait the tables and like serve the food and stuff like that. Just cool. Like a really cool deal. Yeah. And so George McCaskey, who's the chairman of the Chicago Bears, they actually run into each other at the mall of all places. And George McCaskey is like, hey, I didn't get the invite. Like, what's up? And Sam's like, oh, sure. Like, here's the time to be there and everything. And so it comes time for the dinner. George McCaskey shows up. He's the first one there. He's wearing a Sam Acho jersey, and he's serving food and all this other stuff. And it stuck out to me because Sam in this episode said, at that moment, I knew I would run through a brick wall for that man. And so that's kind of a good leadership lesson that even I've been trying to process on my own, and something that I kind of want to take in. And really what y'all are hitting on, it's the service, right? It's the being there for your people, right. Which even sometimes I'm learning goes beyond the hours that you clock in and clock out. So yeah, that's all good stuff. What would you say is maybe something that people can get wrong in leadership or in leading their peers?
So I think for sure one of the things a lot of people will mistake is they'll be really focused on what they look like and how they're presenting themselves, or are they even being the best leader? A lot of people will focus on, well, am I leading right? Am I doing this right? Did I say that right? How are they responding to me? And they focus on that so much, then they're not, and that's what they're focused on. That's what their care is on, and not, well, did I help this person? Am I properly assisting them? Am I doing what they need? And for example, I mean, I'll find myself when I'm leading worship, simply playing electric guitar, I'll be up there and I'll be playing and I'll stiffen up to make sure I look good, and I'm like, nobody's watching me, and even if they were, that's not what it's about. I should be sitting there, playing guitar to not only just play guitar for the sake of the music, but to lead in worship and to worship. And I need to be sitting there worshiping how I think is best to worship, because my goal of being there is so that when people look at me and see how I'm worshiping, they can be like, oh, I can worship in that same way. You're guiding people basically is they look at you and you're setting an example for them of, what they can be able to do. Is oh, I can worship how he's worshiping, and not oh, he looks good worshiping. It's not.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's like the idea of like perfectionism is like, as a leader you are like, oh well, all these people are watching me, so like I need to have it all together and I need to appear like, I ever make a mistake, a lot of times I feel like people will kind of like, oh well, it's because so and so didn't do their job, or oh it's because, and even if it is like, you're the leader, you're kind of the person that's like seen as like, hey, if someone didn't do their job, maybe you didn't communicate well enough to like make sure that happened. And so I feel like people definitely get that wrong. I was gonna say like, it's just the idea of making sure your image is preserved, whether or not like what you're doing is actually like serving the people around you, and making sure that they are still, benefiting from what you're doing in a way that's like, what you're serving them with.
Yeah, there's a difference between power-seeking leadership and servant leadership, like y'all are talking about, and leading in humility. I think of an instance. There was somebody I was involved at my college, and there was somebody there who was in kind of a high level of leadership, and they had come from a very like big finance background, where it's like a top dog, all this stuff, and somebody was like, "Have you ever noticed how he shakes your hand?" And I was like, "What?" And I'm like, "No, I've never noticed that." And he was like, "Watch what he does. Like, it's a strategy that some people will use too. It's like, you go to do a handshake, they'll pull your hand in closer to shake it to show like, I'm in charge here." Yeah, and so there's things that people will strive for in leadership, this like power seeking, this status, that sort of deal. And then biblical leadership, and the leadership that y'all are talking about, that servant leadership, is a leadership of humility and wanting to serve the people. And I've learned, when I have servant leaders, I've worked for both types, power-seeking leaders and the servant leaders. I want to work much more for a servant leader than I do a power-seeking leader. And just biblically, like, that's how we're called to lead. You get the picture of Jesus washing his disciples' feet, right? He's leading them, and he gets down in this moment and washes his disciples' feet. And so y'all are getting it really, really good stuff.
I wanted to further on that, actually.
Yeah.
I think another thing I can kind of add on to that is you don't have to be in a leadership position to lead. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not on the worship team, I can't be singing, or even something different. I'm not on the prayer team, I can't pray with this person. That's a big one. I'm not on the prayer team, but I think that's one of the most important things, is to be able to counsel with someone, to be able to pray with someone, to be able to take their concerns, take their needs, as we were saying earlier, and care for them, and lead by example almost. And that's a big thing, is you don't have to be a leader to lead by example even. You can be in the audience during worship and have your hands out in worship because you want to, not because you think that looks good, but because you want to, because you feel like you're more connected to God that way, if that's how you feel. And someone's like, they're free, and they're not even on the stage, and they can do that. That's, I think, even more important than someone on the stage doing that, is they're looking at their neighbor next to them, and they're like, they feel comfortable to do that. I feel comfortable to worship how I want, and not to be here caring about, am I worshiping right? Am I singing that right?
Yeah.
And so it's definitely leading by example too, and just, you don't have to be in a leadership position.
Yeah. We all have a level of influence, whether we realize we do or not.
Yeah.
And so that's a big one, especially for those who are listening, who are watching, who are like, okay, I'm not in a leadership position, this doesn't apply to me. It's like, no, it definitely applies to you. There's a way to lead without being in a leadership position, and a way to fulfill what God has called you to do, even if that means you're not somebody who has been called to be on a stage or whatever it may be. It's like, no, you definitely have a role of influence to fulfill. That's just really good stuff. The way I'll kind of wrap up our time here is to kind of end with this question for y'all, just getting personal. What kind of leader do you want to be viewed as by your peers?
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I feel like any answer you give, there's like some kind of thing I could think of, like, well, there's also this. But I think, like, first and foremost, I mean, it kind of goes back to what we answered the first question. But, like, I think that if as a leader, I'd want to be seen as, like, she serves others well and she cares about the people that you're serving. So, like we talked about, I go to Klein Oak and I'm our president of the choir program. And there's we have all different types of committees that do different roles to organize choir. And so I try, and sometimes definitely fail, to make sure that each person feels like I'm empowering them to, a lot of them are younger than me. And so I think it's huge, especially in Pointbreak too, for the younger kids, to see like, hey, like upperclassmen, we're not just like here to be like, oh, we're bigger than you, we're older than you, but like we're empowering you to take leadership in any sense, whether that's from sitting in your chairs or one day joining a serve team or leading one. But I think as a leader, I'd want to be seen as someone that empowers and serves people well, to feel comfortable enough to be like, hey, that person makes mistakes. They are not just on this pedestal because they want the leadership position. They want to serve you. And that's why they were given that position, because they love serving people, or they're just, they're there for that. So I think that's probably like the basis of the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to beat, but
Yeah.
But I think something you said was to the individual, and I think that's important. Is does each and every person who I encounter know that I care about them? Isn't it not that I'm just treating them that way to even be seen as a better leader? You know what I mean? One of the things that I find in that question is it's like I can't speak. I'll think more about how I want to be as a leader than how I want to be viewed as a leader. Because a lot of times I'll find myself making these same mistakes and over again, and I'm like, well, no, I'm not leading leading how people don't see, if that makes any sense. And so when I go to be with someone or whatever, and they say, oh, they really care for me, do I actually, or am I just doing that to seem like I do? You know, stuff like that,
like a deep level of authenticity.
Right. Yeah. Focused on internally, am I leading right?
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome.
It comes from a heart place first, and if it doesn't, then you're gonna see those things where it's like, all the time I make mistakes and I make the same mistakes, and you're like, gosh, why does this keep happening? And you like, hey, there's things I need to address, like for myself.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think, and to kind of go back on the second question, but is we sit here and we set these bounds for how to lead, and we're like, oh, well, you should lead by this and do this and act this way. But if we're not we, but in general, are discussing that, and you're not mentioning, who's the proper leader, then you're doing it wrong. I mean, basically saying you should be following the example of Christ in every situation is I know it's a common saying, but what would Jesus do? I mean, he sat down and he washed his disciples' feet. I'm not saying literally we need to wash, our who we're leading their feet, but I mean, serving and acting how he would, and praying about it too, is God, did I help me lead these people, and just continually going back to God on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really good stuff. Well, thank you both for sitting down. I really enjoyed this conversation. There's always those episodes of the Roundtable where I'm like, I could talk for like an hour. This is one of those ones. And so y'all have given some really great stuff. So thank y'all for sitting at the table with me. And thank y'all for joining as well. We will be back next Sunday night with another episode of the Roundtable. You can also listen to it on the Pointbreak podcast, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts. But until then, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Sunday night.